Hey, everybody. On the show today is Jill Payne. I grew up with Jill. She was one of the best paddlers, just one of the best athletes you've ever met in your life. She's done all athletics at the highest level. She is, more importantly, a better person. And I think somewhere along the way, Jill realized that she had a gift to offer the world. And with her athleticism, her understanding of human dynamics, her spirituality, her enthusiastic energy. Since our interview, Jill's written a book. Says it's called "Be a Dime: Unleash Your Inherent Energy and Live Life More Fully." Jill's couldn't be more infectious with her energy. Couldn't be more of a wonderful, loving person. Enjoy the episode. If you have any more questions for Jill, let me know and I can ask her. Thanks so much for taking the time, Jill. You're a gem, and I hope everyone enjoys. Have a great one. Bye bye.
Yeah. And then who else was Ben? Oh, my cousin Steve, who teaches gratitude. And my cousin Ben, who's really good on beliefs. So you're the sixth one. You're the sixth person that I'm
And I'm
gonna
kind
speak
of like
to.
your cousin,
Yeah, I mean, feels like it for sure. Um, and the
spiritual
reason
cousin.
why I wanted to talk to you first, one of the first ones that I wanted to do in the first 10, is because you are one of the few people that I've met that vibrates or feels or lives the way they talk. So that's one of the things that I was trying to get the first 10 people who were like everyone that I spoke to so far, I know them in their personal life and they're not like saying like you should accept everyone and then they drive down the road like screaming at people and throwing things and things like that. So last week when I was going through my list of like 29 people to talk to, I saw Jill Payne and I'm like, okay, hopefully Jill's available and I can talk to Jill next because that's what my list told me. Yeah.
What? What a compliment. Love it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's true. I wouldn't say it. I wouldn't lie.
I believe you.
So, the first thing it's funny, but this is the first thing I'm doing with everyone I talk to them. The thing that they did most recently that affected my life. So, the thing that I'm going to tell you this because you don't know this, but when we hung out last year, you told me you never use money anymore, like physical money. So, since that time we hung out, I've stopped using physical money. I just use my tap and my cards for everything. And like once in a while, I have to go to the bank and get money for Kijiji or something like that. But besides that, that's I always have Jill Payne in my mind because I'm like, oh, I don't have cash, and I am never going to have cash again because it makes no sense.
It doesn't. Every time I actually see cash, I think, whew, it's a relic. Like a toonie. I think, whew, put that in the museum.
Yeah. So Jill, I've known you for like, oh my god, I don't even know how old you were when I met you. Like, old when you started paddling?
I was 5.
Okay, so I've known you since you were 5 years old.
So I'm 38. So what's that?
Only 33 years.
Almost my whole life.
Um,
Yeah.
so one day I got it. So I started meditating and breathing, and then I'd get these random messages from people from the past, and they were usually like, I don't know, just kind of see if I was really sober and really meditating with a spiritual teacher from South India. And you reached out one time, and I was like, oh, I wonder if this is legitimate. So I responded to you, and then then you responded with like all of the things that you had done, and I was like, what the hell, Jill Payne? So how did you go from the the last I saw of you were like superstar paddler to spiritual teacher and still being an elite athlete? How did that happen?
Interesting question. It was never the plan. I feel like that was never something I thought I would be doing when I was living in Windsor and paddling, you know. Um, so I guess what happened was then I went to St. FX after high school and I played rugby. I tell this story because I remember my mom, it's a drive from like Windsor to Antigonish. It's like 3 hours. I remember one time she tried to have like a real deep conversation where she was like, there's like your thoughts become your reality and the things you think and and I was like, oh my God. I thought if I think about getting sick, I'm gonna get sick. Like that's the only thing I could get from that conversation. But I remember being like kind of, oh, like I think that was the first like kind of little nudge. And then like right after that, my roommate in the person I was living with in university, her like boyfriend's best friend died in a car accident. And I just had this weird premonition that this spirit was around us, and I was so freaked out. So it was kind of like in university was the first time I had this idea that like there's more than just my physical being happening here, so but it was like too much for me to even get into. So my mom started to like send me these DVDs and things to listen to, and I just like I didn't listen to them. Then after university I went to Victoria. Then I did my teaching degree. Then I went to Costa Rica for 10 years. And I was in Costa Rica and I was teaching fitness at a open air gym, and I was working at the school, and I just started, I started to get into all this stuff a little bit more and more, so yoga. Then I think all my things start with a breakup. Then, like I had a breakup, little heartbreak. I end up leaving Costa Rica very quickly, and I'm like sleeping on my couch in my sister's house in Victoria. This wasn't the plan, like like and wanting to walk around, and like I was just waiting for him to like show up, and wanting to tell everyone the sad story. And I had a friend, a yoga teacher, and she said, "Is this a story you like?" And I was like, "Well, no." And she's like, "Well, I'm going to stop you right there. I love you too much to let you get into it." And I was like, "What? You're not listening to me, So I got kind of irritated. And then she started to send me these Abraham Hicks videos. You know Abraham Hicks, right? So like law of attraction, and really getting into like our thoughts are reality, we're vibration, everything is frequency, like there's a source inside of me that loves me so much. Like all of that was just kind of like mind blowing and caught me at like a really low point in my life, you know, mentally. And then I remember talking to my mom and I was like, "Yeah, I'm listening to this Abraham Hicks." And she's like, "I've been sending you those DVDs for years." Like, sure enough, I look back and it's like so many Abraham Hickses, so many Bruce Lipton, like all this stuff. So my mom was like, I always say my mom was into it, maybe not practicing it as much as she would have liked to, but like she understood it, and she wanted me to understand it. So like I just think it kind of came full circle. So then I got really into Abraham Hicks, and I would spend like I was teaching a couple of yoga classes a week, and I would spend like hours just like listening and studying. And then something would come up for someone. And in the beginning, I feel bad because in the beginning, you'd be like, "You want me to deconstruct that for you? You created that. You want me to tell you how you created that?" Like but my mind was just working that way, But it was also like a super exciting time because I would think about something and I would get these immediate results, and I would think, "Holy shit! Like this shit is like it's a big deal," right? So it was like I always say when I start to teach people about Abraham, I'm like, I wish that I had never heard this before. Like I wish that I was just learning this for the first time, because I remember that time being like so exciting and expansive and fun, really. So I did that. Then I went back to Costa Rica and then ended up teaching at a gym. I created this fitness studio. Was there for another 8 years. Started back at going out with the guy I broke up with again for another 8 years, and then started to realize like what was happening. I was super interested in like what was happening when people would come into the gym. Some people would leave feeling amazing. Some people would leave feeling the same. Like what was the difference between those types of people? How were they? I started to get into this idea of how were they managing their energy. So that kind of became my focus. And at the time, I was like, I think about now I have a 2-year-old, but like before I had a kid, I could like literally immerse myself in some sort of teaching and watch everything and listen to everything. Like I feel like I realize working with so many people that sometimes I say like, "Hey, you should listen to this, listen to this podcast or watch this video," and they don't. And I think like this is life changing. How can you not listen to this 5 minutes? Because I would listen to hours, So like I would pick someone, Joe Dispenza, and like for 3 months, I would just listen to everything Joe Dispenza until I got it and I integrated it and I could explain it in a different way. Then Tony Robbins, everything about Tony Robbins, every single from 30 years ago, I would listen to absolutely everything. Once I kind of understood it and could articulate it in my own words, then I'd get on to something else. So I kind of started to do that, created this program called Energy Management, started to train celebrities, and then got asked to go speak in companies. And that's when I realized I loved speaking in front of that kind of group and that kind of energy, and the travel, all of it was just like a dream. I'm from Windsor, Nova Scotia. So anytime I'm on a flight that I didn't pay for, I feel like it's a big deal. So I started to do that. And then I realized I wanted to have my own thing to talk about. I used to teach like little circuits you could do at your desk that no one's going to do. So then it kind of evolved into this energy management program and curriculum. And I used to do it in part with fitness. So it would be partly the principles of energy management, and then we would practice it in our physical bodies in a workout. And then it kind of transitioned to just really, really straight corporate. So like keynotes and executive coaching and one-on-one coaching and all of that stuff. I created a dashboard, videos, things that make it scalable, a language that everyone can understand, taking all the kind of spiritual information and bring it into a language that everyone can understand and apply quickly to feel better. And now I've kind of made another shift where I'm actually taking everything I created corporately and I'm starting to work with sports teams.
Yeah, that was awesome. So there's about 7 things that I have that I want to ask out of that, but I just want to add that for me what was the beginning. Like I started with Art of Living, and Shri kind of just stumbled into it when in 2002. But then I watched the Ashtavakra Gita explaining consciousness, and it was 2007. And I would read the book now. I watch it I still watch it, and I read it, and I'm like, this is the 15th time I've done that. How did I just never see this before? But for me, that was the beginning of the, oh, okay, I thought that. And then, so yeah, it's really neat. So, because another thing I wanted to make sure that people that are listening to this is like, there's not just one way, right? There's different ways to get to the source. And you've already touched on it. But there's one thing that you said that I was going to actually was the last question I had written down to ask you, but you just touched on it. And I'd like, because I think you kind of talked about this when we were together, but I'd kind of like you to explain it, is the celebrity piece. You don't have to talk about who the celebrities are, but just that, because there's no specialness for you when I talk to you about any human. Doesn't matter who it is. Like everyone's a person and they have their stuff. So I wanted you just to talk about that celebrity that you've spent time, doesn't matter who it is. I don't care about the name. But that specialness and how you don't see it, or I don't believe you see it, maybe you do, and how you are able to see them as people as opposed to an image or a concept.
Yeah, I think I end up with a lot of people that other people would be nervous around, maybe. And I think I also went to a private school when I was young, and I was someone who didn't have a lot of money, or so I think I also got used to hanging out with people who were maybe different economically than me, but being able to already see the humanness in them. But yeah, I think I just try to be myself. Like I think that's why I end up spending time with them more so, because yeah, I guess I don't feel uncomfortable or awkward, or I think I just like to hang around people that are fun. And the celebrities that I've worked with have been really quite fun, so it wasn't ever a thing about, if there was a celebrity that wasn't fun, I don't think I would be interested in spending time with them. You know what I mean? I'm sure there's lots of celebrities that aren't fun, but I don't. So for me, it was more about, how do I feel around this person? Am I enjoying myself? Do I feel like I can express myself? Am I on a good channel? But I think, I don't know if I told you this, but like the celebrities I've been around too, some of them are so good at staying at a high channel that like you can't show up on a low channel. It's like, it's awkward.
Okay, so you're going to have to break down high channel, low channel for people that don't know what that means.
Okay, I'd love to. So the way that I see things, there's like a scale of 10. So I just put everything on a scale of 10 to make more sense of it, right? So when I'm full of capacity, I'm really self-aware, I'm self-regulated, I have the ability to do things that are good for me. I tend to have more energy. And when I have more energy, I'm in a better mood. And when I'm in a better mood, I experience life differently, right? So that's what I would consider a high channel. So it's elevated emotions. When I'm living regularly on elevated emotions, and I don't mean like toxic positivity, like pretending I'm living on regulated, like.
Can you speak a bit more about that? Because I think that's what a lot of people think it is. Because like, you're quite attractive. You have a beautiful body. You've had a success. You've had money. You have all this da 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 da, and they think that toxic. So can you go a little bit, because I really think that's really nice for people to hear about, because that's what they think it is. Like, oh look, I'm Jill,
Right,
and I'm
like
happy all the time.
I get it. Like, and
Yeah.
maybe in the beginning when I first started to teach it, it would have been kind of like, I mean, I think my lifestyle at the time, like my biggest problem was that the waves were too loud when there was high tide in Costa Rica. Like I could barely sleep. so loud, like literally that was that. What time am I going to go surfing? Sunrise or sunset today? I don't know, So I was creating it from that kind of idyllic space. But now lots of life has happened to me and I'm not on a high channel all the time. And I realize that we're human beings who experience a range of emotions and we're not trying to be a 10 every single second of the day. I use the scale to help me be aware of what channel I'm on and then to understand what tools I need to regulate myself. And we're not trying to get to a 10 because we want to be positive. We're trying to get to a 10 because when I'm in a regulated state, I actually fucking feel better, So it's not about like, I need to just pretend that nothing's wrong, but I need to have capacity to deal with the things that I'm having difficulty with. Right? Does that make sense? So I'm not pretending there's no problems. I'm trying to get myself enough energy and capacity to handle or a creative solution to see it differently. So it's about kind of being more my full self, my authentic self. Like that's what I see as being a 10, not this like positive, everything's fine. But I also think when I am full of capacity and self-aware and self-regulated, I will probably have the tendency to also be more positive, but I don't think that's something, I think it's something we can. So my formula for how you manage your energy and capacity is what you do with your body, what you choose to focus on, and the dialogue you use with yourself. Right. So all of those things are choices. So no one else is going to determine what I do with my body, what I focus on, and how I speak to myself. Right. So it's a matter of saying, yeah, I can't control the outside circumstances, but I can control those things, which are going to control my mood and my experience of life. So I'm not saying there are no problems. I'm saying that I have the ability to get myself capacity to handle those problems. And it might not be positively, but I'm going to feel capable and my nervous system is going to feel regulated. And that's going to allow me to create well-being and healthy relationships and all of that stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's beautifully
Because
explained.
when people are like, oh, it's toxic positivity, I'm like, oh, here we go. Like, I just feel like that is the last thing. Like, if you actually listen to what I'm saying, that's not what I'm saying at all.
And good for them for at least being aware of what toxic positivity is. And
Totally.
so, um, and another thing too is that, like when I was speaking to Steve Foran about this a couple weeks ago, like this journey for me has been 45, 23 years now, 22 years, I think now. How many years have you been on the spiritual path? Would you say how many years did this?
Like, probably, I don't know, like, probably since I was like 23, 24. So, like,
Yeah.
15 years.
Yeah. So something sometimes people need like one of the things I want to people understand is patience. Give their kindness, self kindness, patience. Because it's like, oh, Jill said this. I was like, well, Jill put a lot of time and effort into this to get to this. It's not like you just listen and you're like,
Right.
okay, I'm
But
going to be
I
a
also
10.
think like, and I'm sure you're the same. It's not like it's all been roses in 15 years either. Like I've had lots of good material to practice this stuff on, right? So like I always say that someone who's a 10 all the time didn't create this program, Like I had to understand the ups and downs to be able to explain it. And like now we're starting to actually evaluate the program and get some like data on it, right? So we're not evaluating for how positive people feel. We're evaluating for self-compassion, self-awareness, self-regulation, capacity, right? So like your ability to feel like you can change, like, so nowhere in there am I measuring like how positive you feel. That's like a side effect that hopefully comes along with it, but it's not the important piece.
Yeah, and positivity and negativity are all perception and subjective and
Very
depending on
binary. Yeah.
yeah. So okay, so two things we're talking about celebrities being high channel, so you might want I don't know if you want to finish that thought, and then I have another question
Yeah,
about
so
something you just
just
said.
the idea that like I think there's lots of individuals like that like they're literally working on themselves so much and so often that they have a frequency that if I don't kind of check myself before I go in, it's going to be awkward. So I like to spend time around people like that push me to be on a higher frequency. So I find that fun and exciting. So I think that's why I end up in those situations.
Yeah, I definitely think you give off that vibe. So, okay. And then what about when people say you just gave that you gave that little talk and it was really beautiful? I think it's lovely. And then someone says like, yeah, but Jill, yeah, but Jill, I this, yeah, Jill, but you don't understand. Like you have these three things and I can control those, but you don't, like I owe taxes. Like you don't actually, you know what? I'll be real. Like like some real examples, like I just don't want to do anything. Someone said that to me this week. Um, I just my husband's never here. How am I supposed to manage this stuff? And what's
Well,
am I
all
going
of
to say?
that, like that sounds like someone who doesn't have a lot of capacity. So I start slow with people like that, So like I think we're trying to do little, like it could be something. So like for example, I think people all know what to do, right? Like there's no shortage of information on like what I need to do to feel better and to feel healthy. It's like I gotta sleep 9 hours, I gotta eat broccoli every day, I gotta now there's so many more things. I gotta intermittent fast and I gotta cold plunge for 11 minutes a week. And I gotta do breath work. I gotta meditate every day. Like there's a lot of things. I gotta exercise. What else am I missing? I gotta connect with people.
I've got to love myself.
I gotta love myself. That's a big one, right? So there's like a big list here. Yeah, big list of everything that I know I need to do to feel better. But I think the big disconnect is why can't I do it? So like I know what I need to do, but why can't I do it? Right. So I think that's kind of what people would come up and say, like, yeah, I know what I need to do to feel better, but like and I don't see how like managing my body or my focus or my dialogue is gonna like make me cold plunge, or whatever. Right. So the way that I see it is like it's like those things are gonna change your capacity, and that capacity is gonna be what helps you do the things that you're having trouble doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it's excellent. It's really well explained. Okay, so there's
But
two
still, there's
things.
lots. I mean, I get that. Like, I think also if someone's on a really low channel, we need to start slow, right? So, what I was saying is like, there's all these things. I'm not going to tell anyone to like adopt these regimes, like, okay, now you're going to go cold plunge and you're going to go to the gym every day, because if they could do that, they'd already be doing it, right? So, it's not loving for me to ask someone to do something that they don't have the capacity to do with ourselves or others. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to talk to you because I know that you actually do that, and I want people to hear this because I've been meditating, and people are like, "How do you meditate?" And I'm like, "I sit down twice a day, and I meditate." And they're like, "But I can't do it." And I'm like, "Okay, well, you asked me how I do it, and I learned it, and I've done it twice a day since 2005."
So here's a good example. So someone who's having trouble meditating, I would say, okay, let's look at body focused dialogue in terms of our meditation, which I think is really fascinating because like, you know, how do I use body focused dialogue to change my ability to meditate? Well, when I focus on meditating, I'm probably looking at what I can't do and how hard it is, right? So my focus is already on the problems and I have all these other things to do. And then my dialogue while I sit there is probably like, I don't think this is helping. This isn't working. I can't do this. I have so many other things to do. This is a waste of my time. I'd like to see the science that shows me that this is helpful, like, right? So, like, even in terms of and then our body, like, am I sitting in a way that's allowing my breath to, like, fill my lungs and, like, nourish my body? And, am I sitting in a way where my spine is, like, connected to above and below and I'm feeling grounded? Like, so it's like, we have to do something with our body. We have to, what could I focus on when I'm meditating that would make me feel better? Like I could focus on, wow, I'm really happy I'm here. I know this is going to be good for me. I'm just going to shoot for 3 minutes today. 3 minutes is better than I did yesterday. Wow. I've heard this is good for this and this and this. And what can my dialogue be? I always like to talk to myself compassionately. So like I like to call myself baby girl. Baby girl, you're doing great. This is so good. This is you set yourself up, you wanted to do this and now you're doing it, you're following through, you're doing something for yourself. This is so great. So like again, like I think BFD is either going to make all these experiences more difficult or more, I don't know, fulfilling.
Yeah, and see that's the beautiful thing because I that's the exact thing. I can't meditate because I have thoughts. So people believe they're supposed to sit and meditate and be zen, whatever they believe zen to be, right? And then they're supposed to sit have no thoughts for 20 full minutes and then they finish and they feel rejuvenated and then they see their partner or they go find the perfect partner immediately and then they have the perfect relationship with their children and then a Mercedes shows up in their
Right.
driveway.
We need the results right away.
Right. And I honestly have a pure sattvic meditation. I do it twice a day for 20 minutes. I probably have like 10 to 20 seconds a day of it, probably, maybe every other day. And the rest of the time it's like, oh, I hope I asked Jill good questions today. I hope Jill can show up. I need to what I like I hope that the chair on Kijiji that I'm going to go look at, so
But
like that's what's
exactly.
actually.
But I think that's what's interesting is like to be able to say, oh, interesting that my focus goes there. Like I see meditation as a way to investigate those things inside myself. So I'm looking at like, oh, my focus just jumped. That's interesting. And then, oh, and when it jumped, I said this terrible thing to myself. Right. So like, again, I want to, oh, and then my body slumped and I didn't breathe very well, or, so I want to be constantly being able to check in with those three things, and not like they're supposed to be perfect, but I can come back to them.
Yeah, and that's and that getting to the kindness piece of like you are going to have this, your body's going to slump, your breath isn't going to be perfect every time, and there's just having that compassion, um, to
And
know that, and
self-awareness.
that's just one piece. That's just one piece of the 16 list of
I
things that
think the
you.
self-awareness is the key though here, right? And it's the same with our emotions. So like back in the day, like I'm working with athletes, if you were an athlete back in the day and you were anxious, it'd be like, well, stop being anxious, you know? Like that's not helpful. And you're like, I fucking know it's not helpful, right? So like now what we're saying is like,
You just do that with them. Hey, I'm Jill. Don't be anxious. That's the keynote.
yeah,
Thank you.
you should stop that. It's not going to help your
It's not going to
performance.
help your
Like,
performance. Be in the present moment.
and
That's
then like
way
stress
better.
them out about it too, right? Like, oh, well, that's really going to impact
But
things.
I can
Whew.
do it. I did it often. I did it everywhere. So I can do it. You can't? Oh.
But I think now what we're trying to say is like you need to have the awareness of, oh, I'm feeling some anxiety. I'm not going to try to make it go away, but I'm going to try to use these tools to regulate it, so that, and not so that I like show up better for other people, but so I feel better in my own body, and then I perform in ways or behave in ways that are in alignment with my values. You know what I'm saying? So it's the same in the meditation. I'm not trying to say, oh, those thoughts have to go away. I'm saying, oh, interesting. I think this is the whole process of like, oh, interesting that I'm having some thoughts that aren't on the best channel right now. Like that's good for me to know. I'm not going to be like they need to go away. It's all about like you need to talk to those thoughts, right? But like I need to allow them to be there and then try to shift my attention back to something that's going to be more helpful. But I think what could happen is if I have no self-awareness, I just the whole time I sit there thinking about these things and saying horrible things to myself. Like so now I'm like it'd be great if you just catch yourself after a minute or two. That's a win. Instead of them not being there. I think the whole process is to like catch yourself, be nice to yourself, allow what's there to be there, and then choose some tools to apply to it. Like that's how I see it. But
This is great. This is really fun. Can you tell that story about the rugby player that you told me last summer? Because that goes into athletes. The one about the gentleman at the, I don't know his name, at the World Cup that kicked the winning kick.
oh, Johnny Wilkinson.
Oh yeah, Johnny Wilkinson. That's him.
Yeah, Johnny Wilkinson. So there's a great podcast, lots of podcasts on him. He's been super. Now he's on a real interesting journey, but he had that moment that like everyone practices, like seconds left in the World Cup final. Johnny gets the ball, and he does a drop goal to win the whole thing for his whole country. Big deal. And then he like wakes up the next day and he's just not. He doesn't feel any different. Like that thing that you thought was going to be there is not there. And I think that happens for a lot of us on micro levels as well. But like it sent him into a whole thing of like, wow, if this isn't what's going to get me the feeling I want, what is? So I think he had to go back down into some of the depths of things to figure out what that is. But now he's on this cool journey to figure out, how to find the feelings he wants. For me, it's all about the feelings. So we all think like when I get this thing and I'm going to feel this emotion, you know? So I talk about this in focus. Like we all focus on the stuff that we want, thinking it will get us this emotion, right? So like I love our desires because our desires are unique to us. And I think that's really cool. So like what I desire and what you desire are different because innately we want different emotions. Our soul is craving different emotions, right? So I want to look at my goals and then say, wow, what is the emotion I think I'll have when I get that? And then how can I practice that emotion now without the stuff having to be here? Does that make sense?
Oh wow, I've never heard that. Like I've never heard it said like that before. Yeah, that's
right. So like if I think like, and I think this is also interesting. Like I work on this with a lot of clients. Like a lot of people say like, oh, when I lose this weight and when my body looks like this, then I'll feel confident and attractive or happy, And it's like, I think if you can't create feelings of confidence within your own body, like that goal is telling me that I need to practice confidence and that my soul wants to experience the feeling of confidence. But if I can't feel confidence without the number on the scale something saying something, the number on the scale will never create confidence for me unless I can create it for myself. Does that make sense?
So what about, okay, so we'll use confidence as an example.
Another example that might work for you too. So like the other one is money. People say like when I have this amount of money in the bank, then I'll feel safe. But if you're not able to create the feeling of safety within your own body, that number will never create it for you.
No, I understand. I understand what you're saying, and I've read tons about this recently. And I actually have a quote from Merton that I was going to read to you that I just found before the interview. It just jumped off. It's which I'm going to read actually right now. I just opened this book up and I was like, I'm going to read this to Jill. I have no idea why, but here we go because you just said that. So we are already one, and we imagine we are not. And what we have to recover is our original unity. Whatever we have to be is what we are. Thomas Merton. So all these books, I have like 150 books on my shelf, and I was like walking by. It was like 8 minutes before I was going to talk to you. And it was like, read this to Jill. I was like, okay, sure, whatever.
Well, I have a lot to say about that, but that's the idea that like all these emotions we want, we can choose to feel now, right? Like there's ways to feel emotions even if our stuff isn't here, you know?
Yeah. So yeah, and I've read a lot about that, but you seem like you actually can help people experience it because reading something and living something are totally different things. So the
Yeah,
concept of
so the way that I
confidence
would get
and
someone
living
to
it.
do that is right. So I would tell someone to imagine that they have the body they want before they put their feet on the floor in the morning. Like to literally, like you, I think your imagination is so important in this world, right? So to be able to imagine that you are already the thing that you want to be, so that you get to feel the feelings of it. Does that make sense? So like I make like a list of images on a regular basis of like so I think about the things that I desire because it's fun, and then I write an image when it's already happening. So then I'll have like a list of 10 images and then I memorize them and I cycle them. So like a regular person, now you're laughing at me, a regular person sits in line at the superstore and is like mad that they're in line at the grocery store, you know, like so I could be in traffic and be mad that I'm in traffic, you know? Or my brain could be looking at like, well, what's the problem here and saying terrible things to myself, or I could use my mind to like create the future that I actually want, right? So I just allow it to cycle and imagine this future that's not necessarily here yet. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So two things about that. One is the fun piece because my buddies I talked to a couple of weeks ago is a doc, and he has he has the resume that everyone dreams of. And he mentioned the same thing, fun. He just has fun with it. Like, oh, look at this other
It's daydreaming
amazing.
for fun, right?
Yeah. Okay. And then the other thing that I'm always interested in to ask, so 15 years you've been doing this and you teach this to other people, is the piece of, so in Sanskrit, the word is tatastu. So all this or something better. So how do you
Oh, I
add,
always say that when I write my images, I say this or something better. So if I think that I can only have that, I limit myself.
right? Because that's the thing that I'm always wondering about with people who are doing this, and just this is really interesting to discuss is
Right.
the piece of, well, there's so much that I don't know.
Right. The possibilities. Yeah. Like from this, like, yeah, from the frequency that I'm on, I can't see every possibility that is out there for me. Right. But I think by imagining this one, I get to a higher frequency where I might be able to imagine something even bigger from there. Right. So
That's
I'm
beautiful.
using my images as a way to feel the emotions, like, and not in a way like, well, I can't, now I'm going to live in the future and I can't feel anything till I get to these experiences. It's like, no, I don't even need to get to these experiences because I get to feel the emotions of them now. And like whether they happen exactly how I write them down or not, I am on an elevated channel by imagining them in that way. Does that make sense? So like now the program, you're getting into some other stuff here, Mark. The program is like stage one is body focused dialogue and like creating fertile soil. Stage two is like, what do I want? Where am I going? How do I get there? Like my future self. what's the 5-year vision of myself? What is my soul trying to experience through these desires I have of the future? And then stage 3 is like a good gardener. So it's like soil, seeds. A good gardener then is just going to like water it and give it some space. Right. So I think this is like a relatively new stage for me. So this idea that like I don't have to force everything forward. Like the rosebud becomes the rose. So there is another part here of like trusting the process that like if I'm on a great channel and I have a clear vision of the future I want, then if it's meant for me, it's coming. And if it's not, I don't want it. Right. So I think there's also this other piece of using the vision to create the good feelings and the elevated emotions, but then also trusting that like I'm not going to have to fucking force everything into place. Like if it's not going in that direction, it's probably because it's not supposed to. So like understanding, I think that's where you get into this. I like to call God, I pretend that God is my agent. So like my agent is like making sure that everything's working for me for the greater good of all involved, right? So I might think that I have this clear vision of what I want, but if it's not going in a certain way, it's because there's a higher vision for myself or something better is coming, right?
So this is what I wanted to. It's really cool because I really wanted to ask you this question, but I didn't know we were going to get to. So how did a girl from Windsor, Nova Scotia, who had all of these athletic
Windsor's
gifts.
great.
Windsor's. Hey, I love Windsor, man. It's how I.
Yeah,
It's my base.
up and coming too. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love Windsor. I love it. And I was out with the boys the other night for dinner. I was out with Kev, Ian, Aaron, and Darren, and we laughed as hard as you could probably possibly laugh for a couple hours. Darren Phillips is still one of the funniest people alive. So trusting. How did you get to this place of trusting the concept of what you're calling the agent, or and you're referring to God? That trust. How did you actually get there on a daily basis, practically?
Well, I still think that's a big practice. I wouldn't say I'm there on a daily basis, but it's my favorite feeling in the entire world. Right? So the feeling of thinking like I don't have to do everything, like it's everything's happening for me and there's like a source energy or an agent that like loves me so much that wants good things for me, that already has plans, that knows what I need before I need it, right? So I also lived in New York for 3 years and I ended up on Sundays, I would do like church crawls and I would like, I felt almost like it was a secret. People would be like, what are you doing on Sunday? And I'd be like, pretty busy. And I would literally go to like every church in New York City to like, I just felt like I had the ability to listen to whatever message and kind of translate it in a way that made sense for me. I remember someone said, well, I'm not just going to like cherry pick religion. And I thought, I am. Like, that's exactly what I'm going to do. You know, like if there's something that makes me feel better and makes sense to me and I can kind of create a concept that can allow me to feel trusting, I'm going to do it. Right. So there's a lot of things about certain religions that don't align with how I see things. So I just think there's so much value in it though. So I don't want to throw it all out just because there's a couple, you know, so it's like, I know it's really touchy for people. And I mean, I went to the United Church as a kid. I feel like wasn't a lot of like, we just talked about like pancake breakfasts that were on the weekends or like church bazaars, you know, like I don't remember getting much of a message there, you know? But when I was in New York City, I like loved a like almost evangelical aggressive message because it would allow me, there's times where I'd be in tears, just like, cause I felt so like, I get why people go to church. Like anyone who's really anxious, I think like you need Jesus or like a version of that, you know, like you need to understand that like you can't do it all, you know, like you can't do it all. And it's so much more fun and relaxing if you feel like you have this agent who's on your side, right? So, like taking kind of like traditional Christian practices and, you know, all the stuff of like, Jesus knows every hair on your head and every bone in your body and walks with you and talks with you and doesn't even sleep, you know? So, like, I love to take all those. So, it's like Jesus for me is like a personified version of source energy. Does that make sense? So that's what I think. If that word is triggering for people based on their past, then we say agent, because I think we might not know how to have a relationship with the infinite, but I know how to have a relationship with a human who's my agent, right? So it's like looking at that relationship, because that truly, like if you had an agent who was like organizing shit for you, like you would feel calm, like you would feel relaxed, like you would feel trusting that You get to focus on what you like and what you're good at, and someone else is handling the rest, So I think I used to just overdo it and grip the steering wheel so hard. And especially like being your own business, there's times where you're like, I should follow up again and I got to send that proposal again. And I just started saying, my agent is on it. If this is the right one, like they know how to find me, So I like rarely follow up now. I just know that the right ones are going to come. And it's not, I don't get the feeling every day. And I would say that there's a lot of like daily practice that I need to do to be able to create the feeling of trust in my own self. So now that I have a 2-year-old, I'm a single mom with a 2-year-old, it looks differently. And I have more maybe fleeting moments of that, but I'm always thinking about how to, because there's times where like I definitely get into a place where I am like gripping too tight again. And I think, this isn't how this works. Like this isn't how like good things come to me. Like if even a contract, business is easy. If a contract is not coming easily and it feels like, I don't know, there's like resistance, I think this probably isn't going to be fun for me. The ones that work out are the ones that like just happen quickly and I don't have to like over convince or change my pricing or anything like that. Like it's just a natural fit. You know what I'm saying?
As we discussed in the beginning, Jill.
You can't say yes, Jill. Come on.
So I want.
How do you do it though? How do you create the feeling of trust?
I didn't have any trust until I might cry actually, but I didn't have any trust until I did my 12 steps a couple years ago, and now I didn't. I just lived in anger and fear. I thought I didn't. I thought I was like the most. I mean, it's so sad when I talk about it now, but it's true. I really thought I knew everything and I had it all locked down, and then I didn't, obviously. and then I did my 12 steps a couple years ago, and I just realized, like, honestly, like, I thought it was always my father, and it was nothing to do with my father. Just my grandfather. I literally lived like my grandfather was my hero. I had no idea that this was my programming. And I just lived like him. And I just thought if I lived like him, everything would be perfect. And then I did my 12 steps and I was like on the outskirts of Montreal with my sponsor, like bawling my eyes. And I was like, Jack, this is the root of all this, Jack. And I just thought he was the most powerful man I've ever met. And he just ran the family with an iron fist, and everyone just was in awe of him. Everybody was deaf and he could barely walk, and it didn't matter. Everyone was terrified of him, and I loved that fear, I guess. And then the amazing thing was, a couple months ago, I went to the graveyard to find his grave, because I just wanted to really know that death was real, and this man that was so powerful, and he didn't tell me to have him be my hero or anything. He just ended up being that way. And his grave is like this big, like it's like not even a foot long, his little name and his little date of birth and his little box of ashes. And I was like, wow, like we just end up here. And I was like crying in the graveyard. And then my friend called me. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm sitting in the graveyard crying at my grandfather's grave. He's like, oh. I'm like, oh no, I'm not sad. I'm laughing at myself for taking this all so serious. And then just like thy will be done, that's how I attempt to live my life that way. And it's really difficult sometimes because I think I know everything, which I don't. I really don't think I know everything, but I still have the programming and the narrative and the belief and the story going like, I should have this, I'm 45. I should have this. I should have this. I should know this. I should vibrate. But then when I just go into the will of God and just go into the moment with the will, everything's perfect. Because it is perfect. And that's why this quote from Merton, and I got the book, Ask and It's Given, because like I know you're into it.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, but it doesn't, they're all versions of like, thy will, the bigger, let the bigger, like.
Yeah, whoever's in charge loves you so much. Yeah.
And honestly, it's not life altering. I feel like I just started to live because I can listen to people. Like I hung out with you last year and I listened. I had so much fun listening. I'm like, oh my God, you were one of the first people I've spent time with who has like a lot of energy who I haven't seen since I did my steps. And I was like, I was actually able to listen to Jill for the whole, like there was no program, there was no desire, there's no, I'm going to say this, and I was like, oh, wow. Like, and then of course I'd go back into my will and I go back into like, oh, I know best and I want this and I want that. And then it's whatever. It's like
Yeah,
a,
I don't know anyone who's all in it all the time. I mean,
but I do my best
that's a
to,
process.
that's why I breathe and meditate. And I listen, personally, I listen to Ashtavakra. I do silence courses every 3 months. And that's what I do. I read the Yoga Vashista every day, not every day, but when I'm home, I read it, which is a book about, it's a book about um, a woman with a barren womb talking to the son that she gave birth to is essentially it. I mean, it's like a concept that doesn't make, like it's like a crow lands on the branch of a coconut tree and a coconut falls, and they're unrelated events. If you understand this, you don't have to read this text, and if you don't understand it, then read the text, and it's 725 pages. And I read that over and over and over. So that's what I do personally, and I try to hang out with people like you, and my other friends that I've already spoken to, and the other ones I'm going to speak to. I try to spend as much time with people who, however they got there, I feel are vibrating that beautiful energy of, that balance of like being a human, but also having that, je ne sais quoi, that part of them.
Yeah, because I think there are actions that you do need to do action as well, but it's going to be inspired action and you're going to know that it's inspired. But I would also say that, I mean, there's probably parents listening. I think that's also a whole other thing because you feel like not only do I have to like let go of control of myself, but then also this other human that I'm in charge of, So I think there's a lot of, I feel like it's so esoteric to say letting go, but like, I like to say, may God's will be done. That's my like, Jesus, take the wheel.
But it's not, yeah, because this is the thing. I know that we have to end because you have somewhere else to go, but this is maybe the next time we talk, we can talk about this because it's how do you act and, what I would say is dispassion, but acting without the attachment to the result when you do have a mortgage, 3 children. How do you actually do that?
Well, it's also interesting. Like I've been like writing out images of my future and cycling them and everything, but nowhere in my images did I think I would be like raising a child by myself during a pandemic, like trying to run a business. You know what I mean? So like, there's also times where it's like, this isn't the like dream life I created, but like, I still know how to get myself those feelings on a daily basis. You know what I mean? But I think for me, it's about feeling like if I'm doing something and it doesn't feel good, then it's probably not going to result to an outcome. Like my outcome is a good feeling. That's the outcome I want. Right? So like changing the outcome from like, so like it might be a good feeling to say like no to someone, like that might be right? So like my outcome might not be that I want every contract that I can get. It might be like I want to work with the ones that feel good, that allow me to feel passionate and energetic about what I'm doing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you actually talked about that last year. You talked about no and the beauty of no when we hung out last year, which I thought was really cool. About saying no to things.
I actually don't have any story about it. Like I can easily say like that's not going to fit for me, or like that's not the direction I'm going. Like, and I also feel like I don't know if this is a thing, but like I don't get asked to do things very often that I don't want to do. So like I don't know how that works, but like I think a lot of people have this big story that like they got to get their boundaries up and say no to what they. And I just feel like I don't get asked to do things I don't want to do. Like I just do things I want to do, and that's how it goes. And if someone said like, "Hey, you want to do this?" and I really didn't, I just say no. But you want to do this? Like, I don't know. Like I just don't have a story about it. So like I just try to like again, I'm trying to like go towards the feelings and like a successful day for me is one that has the feelings I'm going after, not necessarily the external outcomes.
And not living for the story, I think, is part of the beauty because I think a lot of people are living for the story. Like your friend, the yoga teacher said, "Oh, I'm going to stop you right there," and because it is, stories, and you're like, I don't need the story. I'm okay with no. I don't need a story to explain.
Well, I think there's oftentimes like that's a good example because when someone starts explaining something, where they're going with it. But I think we've always thought like to be a good friend, I have to listen and ask more questions and get them to go more detailed negative into something that doesn't feel good when they talk about it. So like understanding that it's actually quite loving to say like, I got it. I see exactly where you're going with this story. And then like validate and then try to move them in a different direction. Like, yeah, it makes sense that you feel like that. I understand why you feel like that. And this is a lot of fucking parenting right now too, right? Like, yeah, it hurts when you fall. Not like you're fine, right? Like it hurts when you fall, but let's try that again, you know? So it's like I think there's something that's so loving about the idea of not allowing someone to go into the story, which I know is like probably counterintuitive in some ways. I can be compassionate and validate and then try to move them in a different direction instead of try to get them to, because when I talk about something, my body doesn't know if I'm talking about it or experiencing it, you know? Now we're getting on tangents.
Well, we could talk for, which is great. I mean, I
got 5 minutes, 5 more minutes, Mark. Let's go.
Well, actually, you know what I'd like to do a little, I'd like to finish by, unless there's something you'd like to talk about, I have one little thing that I think will make you smile. Is there anything you want to, yeah?
I'm good. May God's will be done.
Yeah. Tim Lynch.
I love Tim Lynch.
Yeah. What is Tim, was one of the most important people in my life. And, to this day, I don't think I would.
Is that the name of this podcast? I love Tim Lynch.
It could be. My little brother
Tim Lynch fan club.
Nick makes fun of me all the time. He's like, I saw Tim, you would have started crying and jumping up down like you saw, like man.
I haven't seen him in so long, but I saw Kevin, and even Kevin can get me talking about Tim.
I know which I kind of feel, yeah, the both of them are special. But yeah, anything like about Timmy. Tim was our paddling coach when we were children in Windsor.
Yeah, I mean, the story of Tim is like, I had another coach when I was like 5. I don't know if you know the story, Mark, but I was in like a flush, so like the easy kayak. And I was literally 5. Now I think about that, like 5 years old in a boat by myself on the water. And like first day, I don't know how to steer. I don't understand that if you paddle twice on one side, you know what I mean? And this coach just let me like get washed up against the rocks for like the whole class, as a 5-year-old. Like I think about this now. And Tim wasn't my coach, but Tim came. And I imagine now, I think as a parent, my parents probably came like, she's not going to want to come back. Like someone's got to do something, So Tim tied a rope to the front of the string on the flush and like just pushed me off the dock and taught me how to steer so that I wouldn't go into the rocks, which I think like apply to all. Like that's my Tim Lynch story, right? So like, it's going to be fun. I think like he taught me a lot of like, I mean, I talk about this, like myself and my sister did canoeing and my older brother and my older sister didn't. And I feel like we're very different in many ways. And I think it's because of the mindset that comes with paddling of like, this is a ridiculous workout and I have no idea how I'm going to finish it. And somehow I do. And then I feel a sense of pride within myself that I've never felt, But I think all that was done in an atmosphere of fun because Tim made it fun, like it was all, he'd give these workouts and I'd think there's no way we're going to finish that. Like I'd think, and maybe one time in the whole history, he'd like stop it halfway, but I think he's going to stop it halfway. And then we get to halfway and I think, well, now I can finish it. So like, it was like, I feel like the mindset of like, I can do anything. And like, I still find, I just kind of started going back to CrossFit and I find that feeling of like, when you're breathless and you're not sure that you can finish something, I love what my brain says in those moments. Like I can hear my dialogue. So my dialogue is not like, you can't. My dialogue is like, there is more here. Like you are not finished. Right. So like, I feel like I can't access that part of myself unless I push myself to those points. And I feel like that's what Tim did in a fun atmosphere all the time. Does that make sense? And I feel like he was also just like, now I'm in the sports world and like, he created a safe environment. Like everything was, so like, I think I almost got into trouble in my later years because I assumed that people were great like Tim was. You know what I mean? Like, so I feel like there was something about like, yeah, it was just so safe and trusting and it allowed me to push myself in a way that like has shaped my mind and my mindset since then. So I think I even in all the coaching, anything I coach, I try to like, it has to be fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And the hard work thing, I remember Tim said to me once at Bellarome, he goes, Mark was terrible when he first started and annoying. He goes, and as it harder it got, he just wouldn't leave. He goes, and now it's just him and Kev because it's like super hard. And I did love it more.
I remember I fell off a chin-up bar when I was 10. I fell off a chin-up bar because they used to make us do chin ups. You remember we were 10 years old and we were like, there was only like, there's only 13 of us and we had to do like 200 chin ups before we could even go on the water. And I remember I stepped on the milk crates and they weren't totally stacked perfectly. This is so old school budget, like a 10-year-old walking on all these milk crates to touch the chin up. And they slid and I broke my thumb. And I remember Tim was in the like he came in the waiting room and they got them to make a cast that I could put a paddle in so that I could continue. So I had a waterproof, I had to put a bag over it with the paddle, but like it was like my summer will not be ruined. So I still have that mindset as well. Like everything's adaptable.
Amazing. All right. Thanks, Jill, for taking the time today. I love talking to you. And thanks so much.
Yeah, I'll come back anytime.
Yeah. Well, I will have you back. I promise. What I'm hoping is people start send some questions at some point, and then I can ask you questions specifically from people. That would be my hope.
Oh, that'd be fun.
That'd be super cool. So, all right. Thanks a lot. I'm going to press stop.